this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger.
There is nothing better than democracy known to man on the face of the earth today. And if you don't like the democracy in the United States, then leave. There's nothing that says people in this country cannot pack up and leave. They can go live in Russia, they could go live in Iraq, they can go live wherever they want to live.
A lot of people blame German people for not standing up to Hitler. I think that they were maybe afraid, and I don't want to sit back and then later have people say, well, why didn't Americans stand up to their government?
Clinton sent us into Kosovo. Clinton sent 350 cruise missiles into Iraq in 1998. Where were they? They weren't there. They weren't there.
And it's not just the Bush administration. The Clinton administration was doing things I didn't like either, and administrations before that. It's policy I'm against, not individual people, and I'm certainly not against the individual people across the street.
I came out here today to support the troops and to support my country, because I think that what we're doing is something that needed to be done. I think war is certainly evil and ugly, and it's a reflection of our fallen condition, but it had to be done. And I think the more that we watch the war unfold, we realize that it did have to be done.
I'm Andrea, and my husband and I have lived in Delhi since 1970 when he came to teach here at the college. And I have taught at the college myself since 1988, and I'm active in a number of community organizations.
Well, it's been a couple of months now. It was decided, we were talking one day, and we decided that we wanted to show our support for the troops that are overseas. One of the reasons is that there were anti-war protesters across the street for several months prior to the war starting, and we just wanted to show our support for the men and women over there.
I'm Bob. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. I moved up to this area, Delhi. I spent 6 years in the Navy Reserves. I'm now the Chief of Police in Delhi. I have a wife and 4 children. And I participated in this project as a citizen, not as a police officer.
I do have a son over there. He's in the Marine Corps. He's with the 2nd Combat Engineer Battalion, 2nd Marines out of Camp Lejeune, but he's been assigned to the 1st Marine since the beginning of the war, which is the ones that have been right up in the front lines there. So that's a personal reason, but even beyond that, I've always been a supportive of our troops, and it's a good thing to do. I mean, we just never want to have another Vietnam. Whether you believe in the government and what they're doing, whether you believe in the system, the policies, that's fine. Everybody has a right to protest. But we should never again, as what happened to the Vietnam veterans, take it out on the troops. Never again should one of them come home and be spit on. That was just wrong, and both sides of the street should realize that and make sure that doesn't happen again.
The word freedom has been bandied about a great deal before this war and during it, and I am here with my American flag as a symbol of freedom. I believe that freedom may sometimes require soldiers. Freedom always requires dissent. That, in a way, it is my patriotic duty when I see our leadership doing things that I disapprove of to make it known that I disapprove of that and to give my reasons for that. I'm John. I've lived in Delhi on and off since I was 9 years old. My father was a doctor here in Delhi, and my wife is now a family doctor here in Delhi. And I work part-time as her nurse. I also work part-time in New York City as a medical editor for a textbook for physicians.
I don't want to demoralize the troops. I think most of the troops are there because they join the service, and it's pretty impossible for them to get out of it now. I think that they are freeing the Iraqi people. I guess I don't think that that's the only thing on our administration's mind. I think we want a spot in the Mideast where we can have a controlling influence. And again, I don't see that as America's role in the world. I'd like our country to be one nation among many, and I'd like to work collaboratively with other nations. And that's why I continue to stand here.
I'm Kate. I've lived in this area almost 20 years. Prior to that, I was in Brooklyn, New York. I was a math teacher. I taught in Uganda for 3.5 years, and then in New York City. Then I stopped to be a full-time mom. Living up here, retired, I do a lot of gardening. I also help facilitate workshops for the Alternatives to Violence Project. And I read and try to see what my government's up to and make comments on it, write letters, etc.
Well, taking a stand against the government is one issue, and they have a right to do that. That's what's great about this country. The problem comes in is when they have signs that say it's immoral and unjust. Signs along those characters where the problem comes in with me, and it's a personal issue with my son, is that my son is going to see those signs. He's not going to see us standing here, and I have to be honest, the media is very liberally slanted. Walter Cronkite admitted that several weeks ago. And they're not going to show the 25,000 people who showed up in Atlanta, Georgia to support the troops. They're going to show 50 people standing there with signs that are anti-troop. And that to me is, because my son will see that sign. What is he supposed to feel like when he sees a sign that says it's immoral and unjust what he's doing? I don't believe he is.
Because of you, our nation is more secure. Because of you, the tyrant has fallen and Iraq is free.
I hope it is a success. I hope democracy goes to Iraq in a better way than it's here. I unfortunately think that there's so much unrest still in that nation. I don't think that they want to have a government imposed on them. I think there still could be, unfortunately, a lot of problems there. I think if we look at Afghanistan, which we claim to have been a military success, there are many problems still existing there. And conditions for most people in the nation have not gotten any better than they were under the Taliban. And as I believe I've heard, that Al-Qaeda is actually regrouping in Afghanistan again. I'm Lydia. I've lived in Delhi since I was 8 years old. I've left to go to college and to spend time living in Massachusetts and in San Francisco and to do a lot of traveling. I moved back to Delhi probably a year and a half ago, and I'm living currently with my boyfriend off the grid, and I work with stone.
Well, let's look at signs. I would say that be the change you wish to see. I think there are an awful lot of people that are fighting this war that are the change that they wish to see. I think there are an awful lot of people that are hoping that they can do some good in Iraq, that they can bring some good to people's lives. And I think it's a difficult job, but I've had a feeling all along that this will result in the greater good. And unfortunately it's a utilitarian argument, but they think it's not. You know, I mean, I can respect that. The greater good is not going to result from what I'm hopeful, and I think that it will. When I don't know how you can watch and read about the horrendous things that people have found in the last several weeks. They're worse than we thought, and think, oh, you know, that should have gone on.
I've done email exchange with supporters of this war and found that very often we seem to be talking about two different wars, that each side has its set of facts and figures and seems to minimize the facts and figures of the other side. I found that eventually I gave up trying to dialogue because there didn't seem to be much of a meeting point.
Southern Iraq is under attack, and not just from the air. The ground war has also begun in a huge assault that the Pentagon hopes will shock and awe the Iraqi forces into submission. In the past 2 hours, Baghdad has come under attack from fighter planes and cruise missiles.
Violence should not be the answer for everything. But I live in the real world and not a fantasy world. And sometimes violence is necessary to stop violence. I've asked them outright, what would you do if somebody was hitting your mother with a baseball bat? Most of them don't have an answer. There are a few, and I will give those few credit, that are true pacifists. But 95% of the peace protesters are not there as true pacifists. They're there for a different agenda. They're there because they're either anti-Bush, anti-American, anti-conservative, and they prove it with some of their signs.
But for me, this protest was mostly about military intervention and the fact that we're now promoting this one nation being the military. I don't want to call them policemen, and I don't know what it's between a policeman or a vigilante. But that scares me more than anything, and I think that makes our lives. I think we live in greater danger now because of this continued unilateralism than we did even before 9/11.
What you're seeing is a special time. I mean, you're seeing 1 hour on a Saturday morning when John and Laura are here to express a view, and I'm here with other people to express another view. So it's difficult. It really isn't a really good dialogue time.
Have you had a chance to talk to any of the people on the other side of the street?
Just last week I spoke to a young man he spoke about the fact that he wanted peace and love in the world, and I agree. I think peace is the greatest thing there is. But to have peace and harmony, there's a price to pay with it. We have to defend ourselves. That's our God-given right as Americans.
Have you been able to dialogue with anybody over there?
No, I have not.
You have not? Okay. Do you have any interest in it?
I would love to.
Okay. All right, thank you very much.
Doing, whether you believe in the system, the policies, that's fine. Everybody has a right to protest. But we should never again, as what happened to the Vietnam veterans, take it out on the troops. Never again should one of them come home and be spit on. That was just wrong, and both sides of the street should realize that and make sure that doesn't happen again.
Now that we're at this stage, I hope it is a success. I hope democracy goes to Iraq in a better way than it's here. I unfortunately think that there's so much unrest still in that nation. I don't.
There's nothing that says people in this country cannot pack up and leave. They can go live in Russia. They could go live in Iraq, they could go live anywhere they wanted.
A lot of people blame German people for not standing up to Hitler.
When Bob says the media is liberal, I find that very hard to believe. As someone once said, can you name one liberal talk show leader on radio? The Times and the New York Times, the LA Times, maybe the Washington Post might be considered liberal papers, but even there, it's more of a centrist than a liberal influence. Newsweek is liberal. Time magazine is liberal. U.S. News and World Report is liberal. All owned, I mean, if they're liberal, then, well, I'd be kind of surprised. Right. I'm John. I've lived in this area for about 20 years. I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York, where I worked for the New York City Board of Education as a radio broadcaster for the board's radio station. Mainly up here, I'm involved with political activity. I'm a Democratic committeeman, church activity in the local church, and try to read and understand what's going on.
I think this whole argument has a lot to do with access to information. When you are in an argument with somebody, you do tend to get carried away by emotion and stress your point more passionately than perhaps you might. That happens to everybody. But what is dangerous about this administration is that they have systematically lied to the American people. People on that side of the street and some folks on our side of the street sent their kids overseas to risk their lives and the lives of the people they were firing at on the basis of deliberately false information. Saddam Hussein was a genocidal dictator. There's no doubt about that. What is infuriating and what is a real danger to democracy is when the government intentionally lies so that their citizens are put in harm's way on the basis of intentionally false information. That is an outrage. It is a sin, and it is a sin against democracy. I'm Nancy. I've lived in the area for about 20 years. I assist my husband and younger son on our family organic dairy farm, and in addition, I write plays and librettos mostly, and teach a writing class, and also direct Shakespeare productions up here.
Saddam Hussein was a danger. How the engagement is undertaken is a matter of debate, but we did what we did, and we are there. And for us to cut and run, to get out on the cheap would be a disaster. It would be a disaster for the people of Iraq and the people of the region, and I think it would be a disaster globally. I'm Richard. I've lived here for 11 years. I'm a retired clergyman. I call myself a recovering left-wing radical. Have served churches locally and in Manhattan and in northern New Jersey. I come from Virginia originally, from the Blue Ridge Mountains. I still serve churches, though I'm officially retired, and in the summer I do gardening, and in the winter I clear snow.
One of the first things that I heard on the tape was the statement that German people didn't stand up and oppose Hitler, and I would hate to, she said, find that the same thing was happening in this country. I would hate to have people say that I wasn't speaking out against my own government, and that makes the direct parallel with Nazi Germany and what the United States is doing.
that's offensive. It's also just manifestly uninformed.
And untrue. And
At one point, I believe Lydia made a comment that she wasn't sure if we were the police of the world or another negative.
Or the vigilante.
Vigilante, yeah. Unfortunately, we are the police of the world at this point in time, I believe. And if anybody else has a comment on that, I believe we have
need to be. That's right. That is. There's a lot of people that are looking up to us and looking for our help and waiting for it, and you don't just stand there and sit on your hands. I'm Joan. I've lived in Delhi for over 35 years, and I've been the town justice for 11 years and been on the town board. I'm retired now and devoting a lot of time to 14 grandchildren and enjoying every minute of it.
And she said something, I think another, I don't want to take her out of context, I think she said something like, I don't think our motives are pure. I think we want a spot in the Mideast. Well, of course we want to have some say in what happens when billions of people in that part of the world would do us and our allies great harm, and have. Not only would, but have. There's 9/11, would and have and will. I think it would be irresponsible to just turn away again for another dozen years.
There was an allegation that the United States is in this for purposes of domination.
Pure speculation.
And that is absolutely wrong. It's not to say that we don't have in our history a manifest destiny that was very much the case 100 years ago. But today it's not the case. It certainly wasn't the case when we went to Europe to fight the Axis, and I don't think it's the case now.
Let's say thank God for the internet, because this information is available from the horse's mouth. There is an organization called the Project for the New American Century, which is completely above board. They've been sending letters. I don't know how long they've been in existence, but for example, they've sent policy recommendations to Clinton. They no longer have to make policy recommendations from the outside because most of the members of PNAC are in the Bush administration. And they have laid out in publicly available documents what they want from America. And what they want from America is basically to run the world. And again, these are not anti-American kooks. These, well,
You should name names.
These are people who are in high office. This is Wolfowitz, this is Pearl, this is Rumsfeld, this is Cheney. They have left a paper trail. They understand that in the real world, as they would put it, what matters is power, what matters is energy, what matters is military might. And they laid out a point by point a strategy for running the world. Again, it is available on the internet. You do a search for PNAC, you'll find the documents. They don't repudiate these documents, they still stand by them.
I think it's an interesting history in the area, considering in the Eisenhower administration, that was where we performed our first coup, and we took out a democratically elected government in Iran and then placed them with our puppet government. Yeah, but the one time democracy has ever come to Iran, we successfully removed it. You know, and it had nothing to do with our love of democracy. It all had to do with cash.
I'm not sure. One point that was made was that the other side just doesn't want to discuss. I guess I would dispute that, because I think I want to discuss, and I think that we all share discussions on email, and several people have forwarded email discussions they're having with people who were on the other side, and they're just, I think more than we, come to the point where I guess we're just not going to talk about it. I guess we're just not going to come to any kind of closure.
Yeah, I would love to get together and talk with them. I don't know if we'll change any minds. I think Andrea said that in the first film. But there's a chance that we can maybe become a little more enlightened, not just about where they're coming from, but what substantiates their point of view. And it sounds very haughty, but for us, it's very difficult to understand how they can substantiate their point of view. As far as we're concerned, the facts, the events, all belie their point of view. So I would love to get together and talk with them about where they're coming from and let them know where I'm coming from, of course. Again, it may not change minds, but nothing can be gained if we just sort of isolate ourselves from each other.
I'm Barbara. I was invited to facilitate a meeting by the filmmaker. And in my professional life, I'm director of a mediation center in a nearby city. It's next stage in the whole meat of this conversation that we're having here tonight is based on each of your own individual philosophies. And you hold your philosophies and you believe what you believe because in your heart and in your mind, it's the right thing to do. That's the thing about us humans. We don't do it because it's the wrong thing to do. What we're here for then, in most cases, is to find out what is at the heart of the matter for each of you individually about the war in Iraq.
Well, morally, I think, and I thought at the time, and I still do, that it was the right thing to do. But I have a very personal vested interest in this because I have a son who is in the service, and that's what precipitated my standing on the opposite side of the street to begin with. Because I had come out a couple of Saturday mornings to the post office, and I had seen the group on the other side of the street. And I guess that's where all of this came from, this personal, very strong feeling that I had that in our little hometown there were those that felt so badly about it that they would do that to those of us, to their neighbors and their sons. And I never at any point got a personal feeling from across the street whether there was anyone from that side of the street that had anybody involved in it, that would know what it was like. And that's how that came about.
There's a wonderful doctrine that keeps me Christian, and it's the doctrine of original sin. It keeps me from getting my hopes too high. This is a dangerous world because people do act the way Hobbes described them.
I think what we have now is a choice between pretending, a la the fellow that said, "Can't we all just get along?" Or being realists. And my time is up.
I may be the only person here that feels this way, but I think what's at the heart of the matter goes way beyond Iraq. I'll illustrate that point by telling you about what for me was the watershed moment in this. I was watching, I believe it was CNBC, and a reporter who had been running around Afghanistan finally caught up to the Taliban chief that he wished to interview, and he got the interview, and he was ecstatic over that. And he said to that Taliban chief, "You don't think you can stand up to American the American and British forces here, do you? And in a rare moment of honesty, this Taliban chieftain said, no, we can't. We're not going to beat the Americans in this battle. And so the reporter said, so then, well, what do you hope to accomplish? And this man said, well, this struggle has been going on for 1,000 years, and we don't expect to win it in 1 year, or 2 years, or 3 years, or maybe even 10. And the reporter said, well, what is your plan? And he said, what we will do is, over the next 100 years, we will kill enough Jewish and Christian children that the West will become dispirited, and then we will win. I'm Bill. I've lived in Delhi for 35 years. I'm a teacher at the college, where I teach humanities and communications courses. We have 3 kids who are all grown up and out of the house.
I'm also someone who thinks that this goes way beyond Iraq, but I don't think that Islamic fundamentalism is a large part of the equation, because what I see is an international network of financiers and arms makers who profit no matter who is killing whom, and who are interested in keeping things going, because no matter who wins or who loses the war, they win. And you can go back and find interlocking groups. The money that supports our current president, his family money, was in part, they got their money partly by financing the Nazis. It's on record. And what these people will do is present a glorified picture of what is to be won in the war, whether it is a religious goal or a patriotic goal, and it looks very convincing if you are expecting the Iraqi citizens to throw flowers at you when you come down the street. But the end result is the same. The end result is chaos and more wars. That's enough for now for me. Only if you want to.
Gosh, John, you know, to me, that's so incredible. That is a view that is just so incredible. I hear you say these things, and I don't believe them. I don't see. There are lots of ways to make money, and this is certainly not the easiest or best one, and it just seems out there to me.
I'm Lydia, and I don't think that we can ever solve the problem of terrorism before finding out why people become terrorists. And I think, I just got finished reading a book about fundamentalist Mormons, Under the Banner of Heaven, and it's very interesting to see a parallel in their fundamentalism, and that they're willing to kill for God, no questions asked, and the fundamentalism that exists within Islam. And it's the same thing. It doesn't have anything to do with religion, but I think we need to address, why do people become this way? How can we stop it? What can we give them that they might not have? What can we, foster some sort of dialogue or set up sustainable economic communities so people can feel like they have respect in their lives? I mean, when you can't feed your kids, when you can't travel to your neighbor's house, when you can't walk out your door, when you've been raped or had your parents shot, or you have an oil company dripping oil down the river that you get your drinking water out of, I'd drive a plane into a building. I mean, it's just, maybe I wouldn't, I hope I wouldn't, but I can see where they're coming from in desperation. In desperation, we will do awful things, and maybe that's original sin. I'm not a big believer in it, but
I was in New York on the morning of September 11th. I saw the second airplane go into the building. I saw both the buildings go down, okay? I have no desire at this stage to understand right now what motivated those people, okay? I'm Gordon. I've lived here for about 10 years, had lived all over the world prior to that, mostly in Asia, because I was a Green Beret lieutenant colonel and ended up serving in the State Department and the Pentagon toward the end of my tour. Been a farmer in llamas and alpacas here in Delaware County for all of that time, and I'm a writer. I do fiction and nonfiction, and run a political column, an opinion column out of the Walton Reporter called The Right Approach that's published weekly there and electronically on my website.
So I have a question for you, though.
For me?
Yes, or
Sure.
for all of you, actually. How do you win a war on terror?
First what you do is kill all the terrorists.
Kill all terrorists.
And then you go back and you find out what were the root causes of them and you correct that, and those can be done on parallel track.
Okay.
In many ways, we're doing exactly that in some of these places.
How do you know who is a terrorist?
Because he wants to kill me, and he makes that fairly plain.
How?
Or he hangs around with other people who want to kill me, and he makes that plain, he or she. It's a gender irrespective sort of thing.
I think that one of the important questions that has to be asked is, can we pull back a little bit from what we think is right and wrong for a minute and talk about what is practicable? It's obvious that the United States has more military power and force than these people in these third world countries, certainly than the Iraqis who suffered under the UN sanctions for whatever it was, 12 years. We could easily run them over, but they don't choose to fight in that classic Clausewitzian way. There's nothing in it for them. Can I finish the point? And so therefore, they resort to guerrilla tactics, as happened in Vietnam. And so it may be that in our zeal to kill all the evil people, it's like one of those video games like Pac-Man, where every time we kill one, we make 5 more. It is, many of these people do come from tribal societies where revenge is like a real thing. Certainly every time we kick down a door, we don't win any hearts and minds. Every time we make a Muslim man put his forehead to the ground, you know, for any other reason than bowing to Allah, we do not win the hearts and minds. It's quite possible.
Thank you. Thank you.
Once I start, you guys are me out of the room.
What we're doing, in effect, and we can look around the world, we can cite some examples, through introduction of free market democracy to countries that have been oppressed, is doing exactly what you're saying. You cataloged all these ills, the torture, the rape, the oil in the water, the pollution, the horrific living standards. That was Saddam's Iraq. That's these oppressed states. That's not, look around here. Look at places like Taiwan, South Korea, that were dictatorships at one time. Look at Singapore, look at Malaysia, look at countries in South America that we had given up on, that have now gone through the fire and have come out the other side and now have respect for the individual, respect for the law, and a much higher standard of living than they had going in. We don't come and stay, we come in free. You know, we didn't take over Germany, we didn't take over Japan, we didn't take over South Korea, we didn't take over a whole litany of places I can give you. We leave, and we leave them the greatest benefit that any one person can give to the other, which is individual freedom.
I think that the United States has done a lot of very good things globally. I think we have done a lot of very, very positive things, absolutely. And I wish I could say that was all we did, because I think we've also unfortunately done a lot of negative things, and horribly negative things. And not only with our government, but with American corporations, and what we allow American corporations to do. We use slave labor in Burma, you know, our corporations do. We hold military coups quite regularly. I was reading an article today that says we were very instrumental in trying to get the coup of Chavez in Venezuela, you know, less than 2 years ago, you know. And I think to look at it only as this white pristine thing is not seeing the full picture. And I think only by really seeing the full picture can we really understand the global perspective.
One of the 7 deadly sins is envy. We cannot expect people we benefit to like us. We cannot. If they do like us, it's a lovely accident, but we cannot expect it. And it's part of living. And I just don't think that we can be dismayed when people who are just emerging from poverty and then get benefited will like us. They'll go through a whole stages of that they've got to work through themselves. So liking us or not liking us envy is something that is endemic to the human race, and we will be the object of it.
No one is saying we're going to have heaven on earth. No one is saying that we're going to turn man from original sin, wash it all away, and turn him into a pristine person again. What we're saying is the world could be a hell of a lot better than it is. And the United States could have been an instrument of making that a hell of a lot better.
And has been.
And has been.
And has been repeatedly
again and
for the last
again.
100 years.
What I'm talking about the great possibilities. We're 17th in the world as far as giving our gross national product that we dedicate to foreign aid, for instance. I mean, Norway is ahead of us, for goodness sake. But we could do, if we could take 10% of the defense budget, which is now going to be $40 billion, right? That's the 10%. No, the 10% would be $40 billion, right? We could cure all kinds of diseases. We could. I mean, you've heard this idealistic, if you want to call it, but it's not beyond the realm of possibility. And so, if we don't do this, what is our alternative? Kicking down doors?
Now we're
Yeah, I mean, Bill's right about that.
What you do. Let me give you an example. I'll bring it more local, okay? You know what I do for a living. I'm a police chief in this village. I do try to keep equal amongst everybody. I think I do a good job. I keep my politics out of work. When I get called to a man with a knife against his wife's throat, I do not go there thinking, I wonder what happened to him when he was 5 years old, which makes him put a knife to his wife's throat. I have to go there and take care of the situation as best as I can. Okay, hopefully nobody's going to be hurt or killed, but if it comes down to it, I'm going home, and maybe the wife would too. I understand where you're coming from, but there's a time to think about why the person is doing it, why the person is violent, but that is not the time now. Now is the time to stop them from killing us.
Yeah, but
Go ahead. I mean, go ahead. Kate.
I think several people on the video asked, what would we who are on our side of the street do to lessen the possibility of more terrorism? And it's interesting that you bring up the Palestinian and the Jew. I think the whole issue in Palestine is really critical, and very positive step would be if we really could put some pressure on Israel to help Palestine have a real state. Unfortunately, I think it is the fundamentalist Jewish part of Israel that's trying to maintain the settlements, which are not supposed to be there according to the Geneva Convention. I think if the Palestinians felt that those settlements were really going to be taken down, if the Palestinians really felt that they too had a homeland, I think that there wouldn't be the Palestinian suicide bombers. I think dealing with that situation and dealing with the man who has the knife to his wife's throat are a little bit different. And I wouldn't be interested in how he was potty trained either, if I were in your shoes. But I think on these bigger issues, there are 35 years that the Palestinians have been.
Can I just rebut just real quick? I do believe you are in my shoes. We are all in the same shoes here because they are trying to kill us.
Okay, Nancy, have a thing.
Go ahead, that's it.
Well, it may not be very useful to ask why the man with the knife to his wife's throat, or to your throat, or my throat, or Joan's throat, you know, how he was potty trained. But it might be interesting for us to ask ourselves you know, why we become violent and confrontational so easily. Obviously, when the World Trade Towers fall down into massive rubble, and I was in New York that day too, and actually my son, who's a journalist, was buried in the ash, but thank God he survived. But I also saw them fall. Obviously, there is a huge international crisis that has to be dealt with, but that doesn't mean that we have to put on blinders and think that we are completely righteous and everybody that lives in the Middle East is completely evil. We have to.
Nobody said that. Nobody said that. Nobody said that.
Okay, all right.
certainly believe that.
Okay, good, great.
In fact, I think it's a very small number of people.
Very small.
But I want to get to my point, which
Oh,
I
I thought that
keep
was
trying
a
to-
point.
No, well, that was
Oh.
like my introduction.
Go ahead. Please.
I may never get to my point.
You may
My
not.
point-
You're down to 25 seconds.
My point is that we ourselves may be being duped. There isn't, I think, any question but that Halliburton had a no-bid contract before we went to war. Anybody that's played a game of Monopoly knows what happens when, you know, after interminable hours, I've actually never gotten to the end of a game of Monopoly because I pass out first, but after interminable hours, one person has all the chips. It's us, and we might be abusing them. We might be duping ourselves with what we read and hear, and we may be thinking in capital letters and ignoring the subtle things.
I'll make a 10-second response. A little tiny 10, and then open. Since maybe the Peloponnesian War, sometime long before Christ, nasty people have attached themselves to warfare and made money from it. By that logic, by John's logic, we probably shouldn't have fought the Civil War and freed the slaves, because there were those carpetbaggers who attempted to make money from it. There are always, in every one of these situations, there are nasty people who will try to make a profit from it. That doesn't mean we don't free the slaves. That doesn't mean we don't liberate France in World War II. That does not mean that we allow the fundamentalists to come after us. We're not, this side is not, we're not Pollyannas. We don't, you know, we know there's lots of nasty things that go on that attach themselves to these efforts. Your point is very well taken.
I agree with that.
I just think that, as I understand Nancy's point, maybe I'm not understanding it rightly, that there seems to be a collusion involved. Yes, people have always been making money, but it appears, and this is just a prima facie thing, you're not saying it's absolutely so, but would be worth looking into, that there may be collusion between those who are in the responsible positions in the administration and large corporations. This is not the Peloponnesian War.
Right.
Now, Cleon and what have you didn't go off and fight the Peloponnesian
And if
War
that
because he
collusion
wanted to make
exists,
Greek
John,
companies.
if that collusion exists, and it may, I don't think it does, but if that collusion exists, then we allow them to attack us?
No, I'm not saying, I'm just saying the point that Nancy's making. It's not the same as you're making. You're
I
saying,
know.
oh,
I know, I
guys are
understand. No,
always
I
making
know.
money in
No,
war,
I-
which again says,
Yeah.
what general principle do we draw from that? We say, well, since people have always been killing each other, let people continue killing each other. People have always been making money on war, let's keep having war. I mean, what general conclusion would we reach?
I don't
We
think
shouldn't
that was-
try maybe to change something? Is it going to
We
be the
should.
same old thing, you slug me, I slug you,
we should.
until the end of time?
But what about the survival of Western civilization?
Oh, I get nervous.
What
when
about
you
the
use phrases
survival?
like that.
What about the survival?
What is
it-
Western civilization?
A good idea.
You got 6 hours?
No.
No, I think it's kind of interesting that as we sit here, you know, we've all had slightly different experiences, but basically, you know, we live in the same place. We've had a lot of the same experiences, and yet, you know, we've drawn some very different conclusions about the world and what it's about. And I also would like to say that I think everybody's being very idealistic about, yes, we're going through all these newspapers and magazines, the internet, and we're objectively sorting, reading. And I don't really think that happens, because I think honestly, you know, you see something that is consistent with your worldview and you say, yeah, now that really makes sense to me, or that is whacked.
you know, and I'm not going to read that. And I think that most of us, although, you know, some of us maybe have to more than others look at various points of view, still, you know, I mean, human nature is going to make us gravitate to what makes sense to us. That's all.
Again, I think goes back to good old common sense, and you know, who's got the stake in it, and you want to weed out the good from the bad, and see where it comes from. I know what I don't listen to. And you don't want to hear that.
That's probably exactly what I listen to.
We may have broken the code here.
I think, I mean, it's nice we got together, and I heard some things that I haven't heard before. But I think we're all going to walk out the same door we walked in. To get back to what Andrea was saying, we sort of filter things through our own, not just our own experiences, but our own moral and structure that we have in our mind. We look at things. Richard looks at things in a Hobbesian way with original sin. I don't look at things that way at all. Man's not perfectible. I'll agree with that, because nothing is perfectible. But I look at things in a far different way. I don't think Richard is going to change his structure, his thought structure, and I haven't certainly changed my thought structure. I don't think anyone here has. So we'll all go out the same door we came in. But it's nice that we had this interchange, and again, it's nice that it was done in a civil manner.
Well, I think it's a good idea to facilitate dialogue among different groups in the community. I have to say at the same time that what you documented, what the film documents, is in a sense a microcosm of the situation throughout the United States. We are polarized. There is no denying that there is a deep divide that runs through our American political culture at this time, for better or for worse, and I think that the more of this kind of thing that's done, perhaps that will begin to mitigate that divide, but it's a long road that we've got to travel.
Look, I think that they tend to think of us as wishy-washy types who lack moral conviction and lack the courage to oppose evil. And I think that we tend to think of them as sort of bunch of yahoos who haven't done their homework. Both of those rather uncharitable types, castings, don't, really conform to the reality of the situation, which is that both groups are comprised of individuals who cherish and are grateful for the liberties that we enjoy here, cherish and are grateful for our children, and endeavor to lead civic lives.
I would absolutely recommend this wholeheartedly to other communities, particularly if the community finds itself divided on this issue or any other issue. There's many issues that divide us. And it's important by having a process like this that we recognize that there are more issues that pull us together than there are that tear us apart, but that we all have a point of view that even if we don't agree with it, we at least in our society need to respect each other's ability to speak it out, and we need to give each other the courtesy, which I think was important because of the ground rules that were set in this dialogue, that we give each other the courtesy to listen rather than just to shout at each other like we're accustomed to watching them do on television.
I think it's also important to have reasonable expectations. I think that if you go into a process like this thinking that you are going to get people to come to your side, you will probably be disappointed. But humans do have a tendency to demonize the enemy, or even people who simply think differently from them. We figure that if they disagree with us, there's something wrong with them. Maybe at worst this becomes they are monsters. And one of the things that a process like this can do is to get you to the point where you think that the people on the other side are fundamentally decent human beings. They just happen to be in the grip of a romantic fantasy about what the world is. And I think that applies equally. Each side thinks that of the other.
I think that both of us on both sides of the street can unite in prayer and/or contemplation that some appropriate exit strategy can be devised that will leave Iraq better off than it was when we entered. I hope it can.